The rain poured relentlessly, drumming against the pavement like a merciless reminder of failure. A man stood beneath a flickering street light, his hands trembling as he clutched a crumpled eviction notice. His name was Daniel Reed, a name Hollywood had long forgotten. But once, long ago, he had beaten Clint Eastwood for a role that could have changed everything. Now he had nothing. Not a home, not a job, not even a future. And the worst part? He had no idea that somewhere at that very moment, Clint Eastwood was looking for him. Decades earlier, Daniel had been a rising star. He had landed a coveted role in a Western film that young Clint Eastwood had auditioned for. Back then, Eastwood was just another struggling actor, his chiseled jawline and steely gaze not enough to secure the part. The role went to Daniel instead, and for a brief moment, it seemed his future was set. But Hollywood is a cruel beast. The film flopped, Daniel's career stalled. One bad decision led to another. Failed auditions, unpaid bills, and finally, an addiction that consumed everything he had left. While Clint Eastwood rose to legendary status, Daniel faded into obscurity, a ghost of a man wandering the streets of Los Angeles, unnoticed and unremembered. Tonight, as the cold seeped through his threadbare coat, Daniel stared at the eviction notice in his hands. Tomorrow he would be on the streets for good. He closed his eyes, ashamed of the man he had become. No one would ever remember his name. Or so he thought. Across town, Clint Eastwood sat in his dimly lit study, flipping through an old stack of casting records. He had been feeling nostalgic, remembering the days when he was just another hopeful actor. That's when he saw it, a name from his past. Daniel Reed. The name hit Clint like a bullet. He hadn't thought about Daniel in years. The man who once stood in his way. The man who won a role that he himself had lost. Curious, Clint searched for Daniel's name online. What he found shocked him. No recent credits, no mentions in the industry, just scattered reports of a man struggling with addiction and poverty. Clint leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He knew what it felt like to be an underdog, to fight for every opportunity. But he also knew what it meant to get a second chance. Clint Eastwood had built his career on second chances, and now he was about to give Daniel one. The next morning, Daniel sat on the steps of his rundown apartment, lost in despair, when a black SUV pulled up in front of him. The window rolled down, and there he was, Clint Eastwood. For a moment, Daniel thought he was hallucinating. But then Clint stepped out, his signature squint locked onto him. "I've been looking for you," Clint said, his voice steady and calm. Daniel couldn't speak. He had spent years convincing himself that his name was forgotten. And yet, here was Clint Eastwood, the biggest name in Hollywood, standing before him. "I know who you are," Clint continued, "and I know what happened." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. He wanted to disappear, to hide from the shame of his wasted life. But Clint wasn't here for pity. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you," Clint said, handing it over. Daniel hesitated before opening it. Inside was an offer letter for a role in an upcoming Eastwood film. "I don't deserve this," Daniel whispered, his voice cracking. Clint smirked. "Neither did I once. But someone gave me a shot. Now it's your turn." It wasn't easy. Stepping back onto a set after years of being forgotten felt like stepping into another life. Daniel battled self-doubt, his hands shaking as he read through the script. He was older now, his face worn by time and regret. But Clint never wavered. "You're still that guy," Clint told him one evening after rehearsal. "The one who beat me for a role. You had something then, and you still do." For the first time in years, Daniel believed him. The film premiered 6 months later. The critics raved about Daniel's performance, calling it the comeback story of the decade. Offers started pouring in. But Daniel didn't just take the fame and run. He used it. He set up a foundation for struggling actors, offering mentorship and financial aid to those who had lost their way. Clint had saved his life. Now he was going to pay it forward. Years later, at a prestigious award ceremony, Daniel Reed stood on stage, his hands clutching an award he never thought he'd hold. The audience roared with applause, but his eyes searched for only one person. Clint Eastwood sat in the front row, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. Daniel's voice wavered as he spoke. "There was a time I thought I was forgotten, that my name didn't matter, but one man, one legend, reminded me that second chances exist." He raised the award toward Clint. "This is because of you." Clint gave him a nod, his expression unreadable. But as the crowd stood in ovation, Daniel swore he saw it, a glint of pride in Clint's eyes. The same pride of a man who had once lost a role to him, and then gave him a far greater one.